Greetings, everybody. Um, I wanted to address something that I saw in one of my comments, um, and this is going to go into the aspect of a video I weighed. I made a while back, talking about this tetrad, the blood moon tetrad thing. That I went into really great detail on, given my hypothesis, if you will, of what this could be, and so I figured I'd come at you with this video. Now, currently, we are in the third day of the fifth biblical month. Okay, I ain't got time to go into that now. If you want to look further into that, you can go to my biblical astronomy playlist on my channel, which I will link you to, and you can go and check that out on how you figure out the days of the month and stuff like that, and the new year and these, and these types of things biblically. Now, the comment that was addressed. Now, as you can see before you, I have this chart, and I made reference of this chart. That the next tetrad is on October 8th, which is at sundown, which would be October 9th, would be Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, if you will. And we had the first blood moon on the 14th. And the comment that was addressed to me was, see Joel 38:31. Google Mazaroth, find a date calculator that adds a number of days to a date. The first tetrad was April 15th, 2014. History. Then add 1,260 days to this date. If you include the end date, you should get 9/25/2017. Actually, I got 9/26. Use this date with stellarium and center on Virgo, the Virgin, and you will see Revelation 12. Now, I'm going to go into this kind of in depth. I'm not going to try and take too much time on this, but I do want to point out that when you're looking at the Mazaroth, or the in our English term, the zodiac, if you will, the word Mazaroth is found in the scripture, and it's in Job 38:31 and 32. I misspelled that, but the Mazaroth is the 12 signs, the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Okay, and each constellation is basically separated into each month. Okay, so in September, basically, you will always have the woman clothed in the sun. However, there are a few instances that, you'll see the moon under her feet and these types of things. So I do want to clarify that before we get into this. But we're going to do exactly what this comment said. But first, we're going to get into some scripture to kind of lay the foundation here to see what's going on, to kind of address this comment. It's a very interesting comment, and that's why I thought it'd be interesting to bring this up. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in Job 38:31 and 32, it reads, "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazaroth in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons?" These are all celestial bodies, celestial signs, or constellations, if you will. And if you look at the word Mazaroth, it's in the sense of distinction, or some noted constellation only in the plural, constellations, perhaps collectively the zodiac. Okay, and it's apparently from 5144, which we get the term Nazar, which is a primitive root to hold aloof, to hold up. Okay, which is abstain from food and drink, from impurity, and even from divine worship. That is apostatize or apostasy type worship, abstain from worship. So that's very interesting in the aspect that this is we're talking about astronomy here, not astrology. Okay, and then compare also to this word, which we find in 2 Kings 23:5, which means mazalah, which is in the sense of raining, a constellation that is a zodiacal sign, perhaps as affecting the weather or a planet. And so obviously we have distinctions that the word Mazzaroth basically is the 12 signs of our English vernacular of the zodiac, okay? And Virgo being one of those 12 signs. Now, this is a very, very good distinction here between worship and the study of the stars or astronomy, okay? And we find this where this word Mazalah is mentioned in 2 Kings 23:5. This is a very, very perfect example of what of the differences is. And it says, "And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah, and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun," Baal is the sun god, "and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven." So here we see the distinction of worship. Okay, we see a lot of that in pagan cultures today. Praying to the sun or worshiping the sun or these types of things, and it's Baal worship. Every single pagan religion on this planet stems from Baal worship or sun worship. And also the different planets, even pagan traditions even now have named the planets after certain gods and goddesses and these types of things. And so that's basically how we have the names of our planets now. I'm not looking at the names of our planets as worship or whatever, but I do use those names just, because that's how we know our planets now. Unfortunately, maybe they were a different name, but the point is you see the distinction and the separation between astronomy and astrology. And that's exactly what these idolatrous priests were doing, was, in a sense, looking at this from a astrological standpoint. What do we have today? We have horoscopes and these types of things. And it's basically kind of like the same thing. Okay? So I just want to get that distinction out of the way, and also to kind of give the definition of Mazzaroth a good meaning here, meaning that this is basically the 12 signs, 12 constellations surrounding the ecliptic or the revolution of the sun. All right, so I figured I'd get that out of the way. So now let's go into the time and date and add the 1,260 days from the first blood moon that happened on April 15th and see what we get. So one more thing I do want to point out is on September 26th, the moon is only going to be 35% illuminated. It's not going to be a full moon. I'm not sure if that really matters or anything, because obviously the moon at 35% illumination is still visible. But obviously in Revelation 12:1, now that's September 26, 2017. Revelation 12:1 through 12:5 states, this is what the Apostle John saw. "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet." Okay. Now I did a word, I looked up the word moon in the New Testament and these types of things, and just to see if this would kind of make a distinction of a full moon or whatever, and it didn't. So I'm not saying that it has to be a full moon, but I will say that obviously the Apostle John, he was a Hebrew, he was a Jew, so I mean he would have. I believe he would have a good distinction of what these signs were that he saw in the heavens. So I'm just trying to think of how he would have saw this. But he sees a wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet. And as I mentioned, when you look at stellarium or whatever, every September, around September, especially as we come near the fall equinox, or the 22nd of September, you will always see the woman clothed with the sun, because the sun actually enters the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. Okay, so again, the Apostle John had to have had that in mind when he saw this. And the moon under her feet. Now, again, there's no distinction whether it has to be a full moon or a waning or waxing crescent or whatever. But it is interesting to note that, to kind of point that out, that on the 26th, the moon is only going to be 35% illuminated in 2017. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, or a serpent, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. So again, we also see distinctions of, this is also a vision that John is seeing too. Okay, and if you really pay attention here, this, he's basically seeing a vision of the first advent of Christ also. And these types of things. She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up, ascended unto God and to his throne. Okay, and obviously that happened 3.5 years after his crucifixion. Or 3.5 years after. 3 days or 40 days after he rose from the dead, basically. So I wanted to bring that point out too. Okay, so when we go to this simple calculation here, this is timeanddate.com date calculator, and you add, you put the date April 15th of 2014, okay, and you put in 1,260 days, and when that's added, you come up to Tuesday, September 26th, 2017. So that's basically 1,260 days after April 15th of 2014. And again, as you saw on the chart, the last blood moon happens, let me just bring it up here. Happens on the September 28th, 2015. So, and the first one was obviously on the 15th of April, and the next one is just a few short months away, actually, a couple months. So, I'm not going to say that this is anything significant, but it is interesting to look at, and this is why I'm doing this video. You kind of see what happens in the heavens 1,260 days later. Okay? Because, I mean, when it comes to the 1,260 days, there's a lot of different versions of this. You have 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days. You have some aspects of 1,260 days added into 1,260 years and these types of things. So it's really kind of hard to say for sure that this is going to be the end of the 1,260 days. But I think what the guy that was commenting was saying that it's, 1,260 days from April 15th. Hopefully he's not saying that this is the return of Christ or anything like that. Is simply you have this vision of the woman clothed in the sun. Okay, and we're gonna kind of go into that right now. Okay, so here we have, this is September 26th, as you can see in the picture before you. This is the constellation Virgo, and here you can see the sun, and this right here, excuse me, this right here is the equator, and this is the ecliptic. Now, obviously, when the sun and the ecliptic meet, and when they cross, that is when the fall equinox is, or the first day of autumn, which is the anywhere between the 21st and the 22nd of September. And so this is the 26th of this year, 2014, and here you see the sun. The woman is clothed with the sun. Here you have the crown of 12 stars around her head. And there's the moon. Now, obviously, the moon is not beneath her feet. And there's Saturn. So, this is September 26th. On September 28th, 2 days later, we see something very interesting. Now, this is this year, okay? Again, we have the woman clothed with the sun, the crown of 12 stars. That hasn't changed. That will always remain so. And we have the moon right here underneath or beneath the woman's feet, right there. And then you have Saturn, which Saturn worshippers like to basically, it's Saturn is representative of Saturnalia, or in other words, Satan. So here we have 2014 now, and this is just prior to the next blood moon, which occurs on the 8th of October. On the 28th, we have this sign in the heavens. The woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, crown of 12 stars, and these types of things. So that could be an interesting date. See if anything specific happens on that time. But this is the year 2014. So let's go ahead and jump to 2015 and see what we see on September 26, 2015. Okay, now this really gets interesting here, especially for 2015. Okay. Now we haven't reached the full 1,260 days, but I'm just going year by year to see if I can pick up any other interesting points that could be of importance, or at least something to look out for. Here we see on September 26th, 2015, 2 years from the end date of 2017 of the 1,260 days, according to the comment given to me. Again, we have the woman clothed with the sun, but here we don't see the moon anywhere underneath her feet. Okay. However, I'm going to get this picture out of the way. I'm going to bring up this one right here. This is September 28th, 2015. Now, what's interesting is, and I zoomed this out far enough to show you that, obviously we know the Earth is a sphere, and we know that eventually the moon will rotate to the point where the moon will be over the Virgin's head. But at September 28, 2015, we see something very interesting, okay, which is the last blood moon, and the moon is at 99.5% illumination, so it's full, okay. But what's interesting here is you see the spring equinox and you see the fall equinox, okay? Obviously, the fall happens on the 22nd of September in 2015, and the spring equinox is anywhere between the 20th and 21st, right here. Again, the blue line is the equator. The red line is the ecliptic. When these two lines meet and they meet twice a year. That's the spring equinox and the fall equinox. Okay. And what's interesting is this moon is under her feet. When you look, take a straight shot down the equator, the moon is underneath her feet in the constellation of Pisces, in the constellation of the fish. Okay? And the spring equinox still falls within the constellation of the fish. And we have been in that age, since the spring equinox is the beginning of the year, we have been in that age since the time of Christ. And it's interesting that we do have a full lunar eclipse on the 28th, on the Feast of Tabernacles, the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And the woman is clothed with the sun. And the moon is at her feet in the constellation of Pisces. Okay, so I figured that was very interesting to point out, because I was looking at that, I'm like, wow, it's directly under her feet at that point. Okay, and that's interesting that is also the last lunar eclipse of this 4 lunar eclipse tetrad, or this 4 blood moon tetrad, or whatever you want to call it. So this is the year 2015. This is next year. So again, this is something to pay attention to, something to possibly look out for. Okay? Let's go on to the next year. Okay, so now we're going to look at 2016 and 2017 real quick before we close this out. Again, if you look at 2016, on September 26, 2016, this is a year after the tetrads, if you will. And again, here we see the woman clothed with the sun, and the moon is not under her feet anywhere near. As a matter of fact, the moon is above her head. Okay, right there. If you look at the picture real closely, you'll see the moon above her head. So obviously, who knows what that might mean? It might not mean anything. But again, this is another further proof that the moon, she is always clothed with the sun, and around the fall. Okay, and especially from September 22nd through October 22nd, basically, that she's basically, or from September up until the winter months is when the sun will exit this constellation and go into another constellation. So, and we have Venus here, which is the bright morning star. And we have the moon up above her head, so obviously that does not fit. Okay, so, but in 2017, we still kind of don't have the full picture, because we have the first portion of this vision in the heavens. Again, we have the woman clothed with the sun. Some people like to proclaim that Jupiter represents the about her being pained, about ready to deliver and give birth, but I don't know. But anyway, we have the woman clothed with the sun, and what's interesting is, yes, the moon is under her feet, and you have Saturn right here, right next to the moon, basically, which again can symbolize Satan or whatever. And we also have the divided serpent right here. And the moon is in this constellation at this time on September 26, 2017. So yes, we do have the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet. Okay? Which is very interesting. But as far as interesting, an interesting timetable, I think 2015 on September 28th, which is the last lunar eclipse, and it also is the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Uh, is very interesting. Also, for the fact that the moon, when it's under her feet, is in the exact constellation that the spring equinox, the beginning of the year, happens. Uh, 7 months later, seven, is when the sun crosses the ecliptic in the springtime, which marks the first of the year. You know, the beginning of the year, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's, there is some very interesting things in the heavens that are taking place. I'm not going to put a full stamp on it. And clearly, yes, the moon is under her feet 1,260 days later on September 26th, 2017. But again, I'm not going to, I can't sit there and say that this is a 100% thing, because I'm not a date setter, and say this is for sure a huge event that's going to happen, and Christ is going to come back, or Jesus is going to come back, and these types. I'm not going to say that. What I will say is, yes, 1,260 days from April 15th, 2014, you do have the woman clothed with the sun, and you do have the moon at her feet, or under her feet. You also have that also on September 28th, 2015 as well. So again, I figured I'd address this comment and add my 2 cents into it, and kind of give you an idea of how I see it. And basically how I see it is this: there's signs. The stars and the moon and the sun are given to us for signs, for seasons, for days, for months and years. And we have a very interesting celestial event happening in these 4 lunar eclipses. I am not going to jump on the bandwagon of John Hagee or Mark Blitz and say, "Oh, this is a fulfillment of Joel when the moon turns to blood red," or whatever. But what I will say is, you do have some interesting signs, and you do have some interesting wonders that are going to be taking place as far as the position of the planets and the stars and the moon, especially in 2015 and 2017, on September 28th, 2015, and September 26th, 2017. So that's all I will say on that matter. You can go and do with this video what you will. I advise you not to be too foolish and make a whole bunch of weird predictions because of this, because that's not what this video was for. And I myself ain't making no predictions on this, because that's not what this video was for. This is just an explanation of a comment that was given that was a very interesting comment, and I hope that I was able to address it in a very sincere manner. And hopefully, I hope this has been a blessing to you. Biblical astronomy is a very interesting study that I like doing from time to time, and that's why I created that playlist for biblical astronomy, is when things like this come up. And I hope this has been insightful for you. So, truth be told, truth be known, stay safe, God bless, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.